Very well, next, I should go there and have a look. His expression slightly changes, and Zeus can't help but recall the space disturbance he encountered when his real self hurried back to the Mount of the Gods. Misfortune is where fortune lies. Fortune is where misfortune lurks. In the instant he fell into the void, his full burst of the power of God King seemed to push his perception beyond a certain limit, discovering a small disturbance at the edge of the world. The Divine King does not know what it is, but intuition tells him that he should go and have a look. Woo! A nameless place, yellow sand fills the sky. The earth is full of cracked and parched soil. In the sky, there is not a hint of moisture or clouds. Occasionally, raindrops fall, yet no clean water source can be found. Those faint red raindrops full of bitter meaning seem like the heavens are weeping or punishing the sin people who have betrayed the deities. Very well, next, I should go there and have a look. His expression slightly changes, and Zeus can't help but recall the space disturbance he encountered when his real self hurried back to the Mount of the Gods. Misfortune is where fortune lies. Fortune is where misfortune lurks. In the instant he fell into the void, his full burst of the power of God King seemed to push his perception beyond a certain limit, discovering a small disturbance at the edge of the world. The Divine King does not know what it is, but intuition tells him that he should go and have a look. Woo! A nameless place, yellow sand fills the sky. The earth is full of cracked and parched soil. In the sky, there is not a hint of moisture or clouds. Occasionally, raindrops fall, yet no clean water source can be found. Those faint red raindrops full of bitter meaning seem like the heavens are weeping or punishing the sin people who have betrayed the deities. He didn't get an answer to the question, and Prometheus chose silence regarding En's inquiry. Yet often, silence is also an answer. So despite the truth being quite shocking, the puppet has no choice but to believe. He, Prometheus, although not like the songs sung in the mortal world, possesses a prophecy concerning the change of the Divine King. But he definitely knows something that can cause immense harm to that entity who has long surpassed the true God's dominion. As for what this method is, Andy finds it hard to guess. He only knows it most likely involves Heracles. Thus, Prometheus's help all the way is both to repay the other party's help and to fulfill his own wish. And clearly, the previous Heracles, even with powerful strength, was still far from meeting his expectations. What is he missing? Andy asked. He is missing a heart to recognize who he truly is. Smilingly replied, the sage answered slowly. I know you want him to venture deep into the spirit realm because, in your view, he is the invited one. Only by following him can you possibly reach the pinnacle of the spirit realm. I agree with your idea, as taking a journey deep into the spirit realm may indeed help him recognize himself. Then what are you waiting for? Don't rush. Cough, cough, cough. Smilingly waving his hand, the deity with a pale face lightly coughed a few times. No one is born with the destiny to bear burdens, even if he is Heracles. Though the Bronze Age has passed, it has taught me many lessons. I will no longer tell others what they should do. I will only step forth when they need me, using all my experience and wisdom to resolve the challenges in front of them. The sun rises, the moon sets. In the blink of an eye, time swiftly passes. On Mount Olympus, though Zeus has thrown Heracles down to the mortal world, he naturally can't stop paying attention to him. After all, he is his most important chess piece, his most exceptional divine person bloodline. Even the process of him using space power to enter the spirit realm did not escape Zeus's view. He is not blind and cannot fail to notice the sudden disappearance of the great hero. Without the real self present, Olympus indeed struggles to block such space changes. But the Divine King is not surprised, because that's how Heracles came to his golden palace. Undoubtedly, those subordinates of the Lord of the Spirit Realm haven't been able to deal with him, so they set their sights on his offspring. Moreover, Alcmena had just had an incident with the whole of Asgard not long ago. It's normal for the other party to grab hold of this handle. However, in any case, this matter is settled. They cannot undo his seal unless they outright kill him. Otherwise, Heracles is of no use to the spirit realm. However, quite unfortunately, as a human adhering to heavenly destiny, The great hero has gained a trace of the heavens' recognition. If the spirit realm kills him, it will purely provide Zeus assistance for his next battle against them. If sacrificing one son, sacrificing one who requires him to completely unify the sovereign of the current world to mold person of God's sealing, could exchange for a great advantage in the future battle with the spirit realm, Zeus would eagerly seek it. Although cultivating Heracles indeed took him a lot of time, deities are undying. As long as he can unify the present world, he has ample opportunity to create a second great hero. Ha! Ultimately let him return, didn't you? Indeed, in your eyes, he is probably a hot potato. Holding the three-color scepter, Zeus sensed the disturbance in the west. There, the seal he left before was touched. If nothing else, Heracles is there. But it's just the remains of Mount Othrys. It's a place with few inhabitants. Frowning slightly, the divine king wanted to relocate him. He sealed Heracles' power, not for him to comfortably live in his own secluded world. But in the next moment, beside the great hero, Zeus suddenly sensed a familiar presence. Hebe, why is she here? Slightly surprised, the divine king was somewhat taken aback. So it seems that during his previous oversight, the wizard who kidnapped the goddess of youth was already dealt with by Heracles. His eyes flash, not knowing what he thought of. Zeus withdrew his hand, no longer attempting to relocate him. Hebe is here too. That's even better. A trace of a smile appeared on his face. Then the divine king's expression returned to calm. Isn't this nice? Alcmena is gone, now there's Hebe. Zephyrus. Your Majesty, you call me? The god of west wind manifested and respectfully asked. Zeus gently waved his hand, handing over a letter formed of divine power. Pass it to Aphrodite, have her act according to my instructions. Make sure not to let Hera notice. This is for her own good. I think they will thank me in the future. Yes, your Majesty. Nodding in agreement, Zephyrus flickered, transforming into a bird. Picking up the letter, he swiftly flew out of the palace. A hint of doubt flashed in Zeus's eyes, wondering why his loyal subordinate recently picked up Poseidon's bad habit of not acting like a proper deity. Yet, as Zephyrus is still capable of getting things done, he didn't pay much mind. Very well, next, I should go there and have a look. His expression slightly changes, and Zeus can't help but recall the space disturbance he encountered when his real self hurried back to the Mount of the Gods. Misfortune is where fortune lies. Fortune is where misfortune lurks. In the instant he fell into the void, his full burst of the power of God King seemed to push his perception beyond a certain limit, discovering a small disturbance at the edge of the world. The divine king does not know what it is, but intuition tells him that he should go and have a look. Woo! A nameless place, yellow sand fills the sky. The earth is full of cracked and parched soil. In the sky, there is not a hint of moisture or clouds. Occasionally, raindrops fall, yet no clean water source can be found. Those faint red raindrops full of bitter meaning seem like the heavens are weeping or punishing the sin people who have betrayed the deities. He didn't dwell on the matter of Oceanus for long, as, in a certain sense, there was no point in focusing on it now. The true form was not present, and the divine artifact was sealed within Asgard. With only this avatar here, Zeus could hardly manage anything. He turned and left, following the vague sensation from before, the divine king constantly moving away from the border of the chaos world. However, with his movement, it was almost visibly apparent that Zeus' incarnation began to grow thin and transparent. The divine power lingering around him also diminished, like a dam releasing a flood, an unstoppable surge. His brow furrowed but then relaxed. To the divine king, this scene was not surprising. Given his status, once he moved away from the envelopment of Chaos World's power, his power's weakening would inevitably occur far faster than any other deity. This was a peculiarity of sovereignty, and an inevitability for the divine king. Fortunately, at present it's just an avatar, and there was no need to overly mind these things. Thus, Zeus paid no mind, proceeding ahead single-mindedly. As time gently passed, in the void around, the presence belonging to chaos became more and more tenuous. The concept of being grew increasingly sparse. The void of non-being became more pronounced. Looking back, the world had turned into a barely discernible speck of light, almost impossible to perceive its existence. Only a mysterious connection maintained in the unseen kept him from getting lost in the emptiness. Fortunately, upon reaching here, Zeus once again detected that special movement. His spirit uplifted. He instinctively quickened his pace. At a certain moment, when his avatar was on the brink of collapse, at the very edge of Chaos Power's radiation, the Divine King finally saw a hint of color distinct from the void. That was a tiny speck, but scrutinized closely, its essence was actually a whole fragmented space. Moments later, as Zeus came to its surroundings, he carefully scrutinized everything before him. If nothing went awry, this should be a leftover remnant that had fallen from the world's edge. Compared to Asgard, its power was so weak. If the past Asgard's divine domain, even after falling into the Chaos world, still struggled with its remaining power of creation for quite a long time until Zeus' incursion brought it to near dissolution. Then this fragment nearly lost resistance even without entering the world, starting its assimilation into chaos order and rules. Of course, nearly does not mean absolutely, so standing outside the fragment, with his avatar like a breath away from collapse, the Divine King could not probe into the movements inside. If he wanted to know what was inside, he must personally go in and see. Yet, confronting this situation, Zeus could not help but hesitate. A weak world fragment was no big deal, but how this fragment came to be was truly the thing that intimidated him. Gazing into the distant profound void, that was where even Chaos Power had not touched. Perhaps the creative force had extended there in another form, but at least there, it had not descended its attention, anchoring the being and non-being along this path. World fragment, outer god. That prophetic dream, destroyer. Not long ago, the eerily vanishing world power of chaos, lord of the spirit realm. The world's sudden surge in power over the recent decades. Even with the aid of this power, even Tartarus underwent such terrifying changes, attempting to peek into the domain beyond greatness. Yet, after its unsuccessful attempt, thanks to that vast source power and the ever-expanding origin of chaos, I had not felt it was weak for long. In a short time, the abyss is close to healing its wounds. His eyes flickered, and at this moment, Zeus thought of many things, involving a world beyond chaos like the former Asgard. While this certainly indicated benefits, it also entailed great risk. And for the Divine King, if he had already completed the unification of the present world, then probing the outside would be justified. He didn't dwell on Oceanus for too long as, in a sense, focusing on it now held no meaning. The main body was absent, and the divine artifact was sealed within Asgard. With just this incarnation, Zeus could hardly accomplish much. Turning away, following the faint sense from before, the Divine King continually distanced himself from the border of the chaos world. But as he moved, almost visibly, Zeus's incarnation began to grow thin and transparent. The divine power lingering around also diminished, like a dam unloading its flood, unstoppable in its descent. Frowning slightly, his brows then relaxed. Regarding the current scene, the Divine King was not surprised. Given his status, once he distanced himself from the coverage of chaos world power, his weakening would proceed at a speed far beyond any other deity. This is the peculiarity of sovereignty and the inevitability for the Divine King. Luckily, for now, he was merely an incarnation and didn't need to overconcern about these. So Zeus paid no mind, only forging ahead with determination. Time flowed slowly, and in the surrounding void, chaos's presence grew increasingly faint. The concept of existence became ever more scarce, and the void's emptiness stood out even more. Looking back, the world had become a barely discernible point of light, almost imperceptible. Only the mysterious connection maintained in the darkness kept him from getting lost in the void. Fortunately, upon arriving here, Zeus once again sensed that unique disturbance. His spirits lifted, and he instinctively quickened his pace. At a certain moment, When the existence of this incarnation was on the verge of collapse, at the very edge of chaos's radiation, the Divine King finally saw a color different from the void. It was a tiny dot, but upon closer inspection, its essence turned out to be an entire fragment of broken space. Moments later, as Zeus approached that fragment, he carefully examined everything before him. If nothing unexpected, this should be a fragment that fell from the edge of the world. And compared to Asgard, its strength was so weak. If the former Asgard had, after falling into the Chaos world, still struggled with its remaining power of creation for quite some time until Zeus intruded before it nearly dissipated. Then this broken fragment almost lost its resistance even before entering the world, starting to assimilate into Chaos's order and rules. Of course, almost does not mean absolute, so standing outside the fragment, with his incarnation in a fragile state, the Divine King could not peer into the happenings inside. If he wanted to know what was inside, he would have to go in and see for himself. However, faced with this situation, Zeus couldn't help hesitating. A weak world fragment, this wasn't much. But how this fragment came to be was the thing that truly made him wary. Gazing into the distant deep void, it was a place even Chaos's power had never touched. Perhaps the creation level might have extended there in another way, but at least he did not cast his attention, anchoring the existence and non-existence along this path. World fragment, outer god, that prophetic dream, destroyer. Not long ago, Chaos's mysteriously dissipating world power, lord of the spirit realm, the suddenly surging power throughout the world in recent decades. Even with this power's push, Tartarus underwent such terrible changes, trying to peer into realms above greatness. And even after his failed attempt, benefited by the vast and boundless source power and Chaos's ever-expanding origin. I didn't feel that he was weakened for too long. In a short time, the abyss was about to heal its wounds. His eyes flickered, and at this moment, Zeus thought of many things, involving a world outside of Chaos, just like the former Asgard. This certainly meant benefits, but it also involved tremendous risks. And for the Divine King, if he had now completed his unification of the current world, then exploring the outside world was also justifiable. Egyptians, what are those? And the Hebrews, their bloodlines indeed seem a bit peculiar, lurking in the shadows without a fixed form. The Divine King's avatar has silently observed for over 10 days, though this shattered world has long lost the concept of sky. His true self imprisoned, Asgard sealed off, without the power of Thunder God and the interface power of the divine domain, Zeus could only harness the strength of abyssal demon lord and evil creatures. Yet when he truly entered this fragmented interface, the Divine King suddenly realized a problem. This place rejects him, opposing him from the root of its laws. If Zeus himself entered here, such weak rejection power would not affect him. But now he is merely an avatar composed of a portion of power, so every bit used diminishes his already limited strength. Therefore, for the Divine King, the urgent task isn't exploring the world's history and deities' information, but finding a host for this portion of his power. The best way to weaken the rejection is to become one of them. Undoubtedly, the natives in this world fragment are the most direct choice. However, unfortunately, even before Chaos Law fully infected this fragment, the locals instinctively reject Zeus's power, except these ones who call themselves Hebrews. Though the Divine King is certain that they are native to this world, the rules comprising their bloodline don't conflict with this place's order. Yet correspondingly, they are also close to Chaos rule-based power, as if they are a race forged by the orders of two worlds. Noble by nature, this is Zeus's sole comment, at least from his perspective. Because in his perception, the power most compatible with this special bloodline is neither abyss and evil creatures, but rather the power of Thunder God and the King's Law, which hadn't even entered this world. Discovering such a race in an otherworld feels like guidance by fate. It seems heaven is telling him that these Hebrews are his natural devotees, meant to become pawns for him to inherit the legacy of the alien realm, adding tiles to his grand plans. However, looking at these satisfactory alien realm human clans, the Divine King still notices a small flaw. That is, they already have their own faith and it appears fairly devout. Lord. Sounds similar to what those humans in Silver Moon City call them. But from the description, it shouldn't be a person. Manifested in fire, guiding them to break free from oppression, is it a protective deity unique to all Hebrews? Why does this sound so familiar? I remember that the Mortal Realms account of Prometheus is just like this. First, doubt sets in, followed by sudden enlightenment. Zeus isn't surprised why there are humans in the alien realm, as from current intelligence it seems each world has gods. So, gods create humans in their image. There's nothing surprising about this. As for the followers of these Hebrews, they indeed resemble Prometheus of the Bronze Age, both in deeds and power. After all, he created this race, which is why he particularly focuses on them. As for the above gods, all-knowing and all-seeing might these people describe, it's worth a listen. If that god truly possessed such power, not to mention the destruction of the alien realm, how could his followers, the Hebrews, become slaves to those Egyptians for thousands of years? Zeus doesn't believe this, it logically doesn't add up. It's known that regarding followers boasting, he has done it himself. In many myths across chaos mortal realms, the divine king possesses omnipotent and omniscient abilities. Although Zeus never acknowledged it, he also never actively denied it. So, reflecting back, he roughly concludes, the creator of these Hebrews is likely Prometheus of the alien realm, a rare type of god, but it's quite normal for two worlds to each have one. This alien realm fire thief likely offended their divine king, the supreme deity those Egyptians talk about. Only unlike us, the alien realm monarch seemingly did not pursue absolute extinction. He did not directly destroy the Bronze Age but instead demoted the humans to slaves. There's nothing wrong with this, but when the apocalypse disaster arrived, he himself couldn't escape, let alone his previous decisions. So the slaves rose to rebel, even one of them became a great prophet, connecting with the creator who had offended the divine king. Ultimately, the world shattered, mortals scattered, and then I came here, discovering their traces. Conclusion drawn, even though there remain points unclear, Zeus believes it to be mostly accurate. If bronze humanity didn't succumb to the Great Flood but were demoted to sin people, slaves, they would likely still remember Prometheus's kindness. If chaos one day faces catastrophe and his power is stripped away, the fire thief might also leave the sea eye to protect the people he created. Nodding secretly, though some uncertainties linger, the divine king thinks this is likely due to differences in rules between worlds. For example, according to these mortals, their deities can die and can even swallow each other. A glint flashed through his eyes, and just for this point alone, Zeus felt his journey wasn't in vain. If he could uncover the secret within, then perhaps he could create new gods akin to the faith gods. Not immortal, yet a genuine deity. Just the thought of it was enticing. So he chuckled softly, looking at the Hebrews fervently praying. Zeus thought for a moment and decided to usurp a nest, creating a Hebrew great prophet of his own. After all, if their gods could swallow one another, even if someday he really met these Hebrews' protector, at worst he would just take on the deity role from the other. Come, prepare to receive the divine miracle I grant you. I will personally prove to you that your faith is real, because I am real. You will embody my will, carry my power, and like that rebellious son of mine, you will render exceptional service for me. After all, if their gods could swallow one another, even if someday he really met these Hebrews' protector, at worst he would just take on the deity role from the other. Come, prepare to receive the divine miracle I grant you. I will personally prove to you that your faith is real, because I am real. You will embody my will, carry my power, and like that rebellious son of mine, you will render exceptional service for me. Egyptians, what are they? And the Hebrews, their bloodline does seem a bit peculiar, lurking in the shadows without a fixed form. The divine king's incarnation had been silently observing for dozens of days, though this broken world had long lost the concept of heaven. His true form was imprisoned, Asgard sealed. Without the power of the thunder god or the interface power of the divine domain, Zeus could only wield the powers of the abyssal demon lord and evil creatures. But the moment he truly entered this broken interface, the divine king suddenly realized a problem. This place rejected him, opposing him from the very roots of its rules. If Zeus had entered this place with his true form, such a weak force of rejection wouldn't have mattered to him. But now, he was merely an incarnation made of partial power. Every bit of power he used was one less bit he had. So for the divine king, the immediate priority wasn't to explore the history and deities of this world, but rather to find a host for this portion of his power. The best way to lessen rejection was to become part of the world. Without a doubt, the natives of this world fragment were the most straightforward choice. However, unfortunately, before Chaos's rules had fully infected this ruin, even the locals instinctively rejected Zeus's power, except those who called themselves Hebrews. Even though the divine king could ascertain that they were native to this world, the rules that formed their bloodline did not conflict with the order of this place. But corresponding to that, their affinity was equally strong for the powers under Chaos's rules, as if they were a race created by the orders of two worlds. Born noble, this was Zeus's only evaluation of them, at least in his perspective. Because in his perception, this special bloodline's most compatible power wasn't the abyss or evil creatures, but the very power of Thunder God and King's Law that he had yet to bring into this world. Discovering such a race in an otherworld was like destiny's guidance to him. It was as if the heavens were telling him that these Hebrews were his natural kin, meant to become pawns for inheriting the alien realm's heritage, contributing to his grand cause. However, now, gazing at the otherworld's people who highly satisfied him, the divine king still noticed a small flaw. And that was, they already had their own faith, which seemed quite devout. Lord. Sounds quite similar to what those humans in Silver Moon City call him. But from the descriptions, it should not be the same person. Manifesting in the fire, guiding them away from oppression. Could it be the exclusive guardian deity of the entire Hebrews? Why does this sound so familiar? I remember now. Isn't this how mortals describe Prometheus? First puzzled, then he suddenly understood. Zeus wasn't surprised why there were humans in the otherworld because from the current intelligence, it seems every world has gods. So gods creating humans in their image isn't surprising. Additionally, these believers of the Hebrews indeed resemble Prometheus of the Bronze Age, both in deeds and power. After all, he had created this race and hence was particularly attentive to them. As for the all-knowing and all-seeing power that these people described above all gods, it's just something to hear. If that god really had such power, leaving aside how the alien realm was destroyed, how could those Hebrews have been enslaved by those Egyptians for thousands of years? Anyway, Zeus didn't believe this at all, as it was entirely illogical. Bear in mind, he too had been exaggerated by his believers, as if he were omnipotent and omniscient in many legends across Chaos's mortal countries. Although Zeus never admitted, he never actively denied it either. So upon reflection, he drew a general conclusion. The creator of these Hebrews is likely the Prometheus of the alien realm, a rare kind of god, yet it's quite normal for one to emerge in each of two worlds. This Prometheus of the alien realm most probably offended their divine king, the supreme god known to those Egyptians. Only, unlike us, that alien monarch may not have exterminated them completely. He didn't destroy the Bronze Age as directly as I did, instead demoting these humans to slaves. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but when the world-ending catastrophe came, he could barely protect himself, let alone worry about past decisions. So the slaves rose in rebellion, and among them walked out a great prophet, connecting with the Creator who had once offended the divine king. Eventually, the world shattered, mortals scattered, and then I arrived here, discovering the traces they left behind. The reasoning concluded, although there were still some unclear aspects, Zeus believed he was largely correct. If bronze humanity hadn't perished in the Great Flood but were demoted to sin people, slaves, they might also still remember Prometheus's mercy. If someday Chaos faces great calamity, and his power is stripped away, the fire thief might also break free of the sea eye to protect his created children once more. Nodding in agreement, the process still had a few uncertain parts, But the divine king saw these as likely differences in the world rules. For example, according to these mortals, their deities can die and can even swallow each other. A glint flashed through his eyes, and just for this point alone, Zeus felt his journey wasn't in vain. If he could uncover the secret within, then perhaps he could create new gods akin to the faith gods. Not immortal, yet a genuine deity. Just the thought of it was enticing. So he chuckled softly, looking at the Hebrews fervently praying. Zeus thought for a moment and decided to usurp a nest, creating a Hebrew great prophet of his own. After all, if their gods could swallow one another, even if someday he really met these Hebrews' protector, at worst he would just take on the deity role from the other. Come, prepare to receive the divine miracle I grant you. I will personally prove to you that your faith is real, because I am real. You will embody my will, carry my power, and like that rebellious son of mine, you will render exceptional service for me. Swoosh! Projection in the front, true self in the back. In the void, it's hard to grasp the concept of distance. All the way forward, Hermes can only barely determine his direction by the position of the world behind him. Not knowing how much time has passed, at a certain moment, at the edge of his perception, the god of commerce vaguely sensed something. Looking up, at the farthest edge of world power, an irregular light point was flickering unsteadily, emitting a dim glow. And before the light point, a familiar yet unfamiliar figure stood there. That is, it's him. His face changed drastically, never expecting to encounter the divine king himself. Retreating a step, Hermes nearly fled on the spot. However, the next moment he reacted from his panic. Hermes suddenly realized that if the one standing before him was that great divine power, the master of gods, he would surely have discovered his presence, so what difference would running make? Conversely, if the other party hadn't noticed his presence, does it mean that he is not that strong and it's all just scaring himself? Is this the incarnation of God King Zeus? But why is he here? Calming down, he observed for a long time. After repeatedly confirming that the other party had not noticed his arrival, Hermes pondered for a moment, feeling a bit of unexpected joy. Although it was just an incarnation, one weak enough not even to notice him. But for the divine king to pay such attention, it must mean that the tiny fragment before him is anything but ordinary. A remnant of a realm similar to the Asgard domain opened by Zeus? After a moment of silence, Hermes gave up the idea of leaving. It is not out of arrogance. In fact, he knows well the gap between himself and great divine power. But considering it from another perspective, a secret that could attract great divine power is undoubtedly extraordinary. Moreover, after calming down, Hermes also recalled the recent battle on Mount Olympus. At that time, he had summoned his most powerful projection to remotely witness the conflict between the God King and the spirit realm. Although he couldn't guarantee how much power Zeus, sealed as he was in Asgard, could extend to the outside world, the other party also had to worry about affairs on Mount of the Gods. Mysteriously a bit excited, a gleam of eagerness flashed in his eyes. As a deity who dared to steal Apollo's cattle at birth, Hermes was never one to follow conventions. No rush. I must first see what it is before deciding whether to act. Exhaling slightly, Hermes let his projection take the lead. Selling heads can be done by some. A losing business won't be taken by anyone. As a former god of commerce, I can't let my capital be wasted. Stepping on flying shoes with wings, he opened the portals between the two realms. Since he had made a decision, Hermes did not hesitate further. Not rushing to take action against the weak incarnation of the divine king that seemed fragile enough to be blown away by a breeze, he merely created a projection of the sea god. Casually creating a little commotion, Hermes successfully attracted Zeus's attention. After all, the ocean god system lies at the edge of the world, at the ocean's end, so their appearance here is quite plausible. Moreover, if anything happens in the future, the news of discovering traces of the ocean god system could serve as a scapegoat. Taking advantage of this opportunity, with a flash of his figure, Hermes arrived within this fragment of the world. TSK, a bit troublesome, slightly shaking his head, unlike Zeus. For Hermes, who has experienced true and illusory traversals, even the materials of the divine artifact he wields have substances from the outer realms mingled in. The differing laws between interfaces are not that difficult to adapt to, at least in the largely chaos-contaminated fragments. The only not-so-good part may be that here, even using the wise man's stone to create projections, the power of dominion was further reduced. Within chaos, information and imprint from the fantasy world could exert 3/10 of a deity's dominion, as both were originally one. Even if not for Lane's existence, perhaps the trajectory of that world would be the true fate. But Hemenu's fragments are different. To it, whether it's the fantasy world or the real chaos, both are foreign powers. In such circumstances, it's difficult for a deity to wield dominion here. Thus, Hermes's greatest reliance, the power of the wise man's stone, was halved. Casually performing a small trick, the god of thieves concealed his tracks. Not long after arriving in this strange world, Hermes found the locals here. But no matter how you looked at it, their situation wasn't great. Egyptians, in luxurious attire, tall and flawless, holding a silver scale by the fingertips. On the two sides of the scale were gold coins and books, respectively. Blood rain was falling from the sky, and Hermes seemed to feel the world weeping. Although it had long been dead, with no chance of revival, like the reflex of a creature with its head cut off, its body would still twitch instinctively. This is the world's final lament, and in Hermes's ears, it is hard not to think of certain things. Just like me, like the demise of the fantasy world. Did you encounter a destroyer as well? Or is it the dissolution of the world itself, the destruction coming from one's own? Silently, Hermes traveled among these Egyptians. If it weren't for the wise man's stone enabling the projection of a quasi-deity, he would have liked to summon the shadow of Mnemosyne, the wife of the god-king of the fantasy world, and mother of the 9 muse goddesses, an ancient Titan deity. With her strength as a blessing, he could easily read the memories of these mortals. Fortunately, after much wandering, Hermes found what he wanted in a broken temple. These were wall paintings and historical records, not gathered in Heliopolis, although the priests following the Egyptian high priest Qasim did not know what happened there. But they still recorded what they saw before the world's end, about the past of the Hemenu world, their order and culture, the legends of the deities, and the end of it all. Browsing through it all, as he looked at everything, Hermes pondered. With her strength as a blessing, he could easily read the memories of these mortals. Fortunately, after much wandering, Hermes found what he wanted in a broken temple. These were wall paintings and historical records, not gathered in Heliopolis, although the priests following the Egyptian high priest Qasim did not know what happened there. But they still recorded what they saw before the world's end, about the past of the Hemenu world, their order and culture, the legends of the deities, and the end of it all. Browsing through it all, Hermes pondered. Whoosh! The projection was in front, the true form behind. Within the void, the concept of distance was hard to grasp. Moving forward incessantly, Hermes could only rely on the position of the world behind him to roughly confirm his direction. Time had passed without knowing how much, when at a certain moment, at the edge of perception, the god of commerce vaguely sensed something. Looking up, at the furthest edge of the world's power extension, an irregular light point was flickering faintly, shimmering intermittently. And before the light point, a familiar yet strange figure stood. It's him. His expression drastically changed, never expecting he would encounter the God King. Taking a step back, Hermes almost fled on the spot. However, in the next moment he recovered from his panic. Suddenly realizing, Hermes pondered if standing before him was the great divine power ruling over gods. Surely it already discovered his presence. Whether he fled or not made no difference. Conversely, if the opposite hadn't discovered his presence, does it mean that at this moment, he perhaps wasn't that strong, all merely self-intimidation? A guise of God King Zeus, but why here? Calmly observing for a long time, repeatedly confirming that the opponent probably hadn't noticed his arrival, Hermes thought for a moment, feeling a certain pleasant surprise. Though just a semblance, and weak enough that it didn't even notice him. But to make the God King pay attention, It seemingly also meant the small fragment in front was exceptional. The remnants of an interface like a place carved out by Zeus such as the Asgard divine domain? After a brief silence, Hermes gave up the thought of leaving. Not out of arrogance, in fact, he very much understood the vast difference between himself and the great divine power. But turning the perspective, any secret capable of attracting the great divine power's attention was certainly extraordinary. Moreover, calming down, Hermes recalled the recent battle on Mount Olympus. At that time, he had summoned his most powerful projection to remotely witness the conflict between the God King and the spirit realm. Although he couldn't guarantee how much strength was left by Zeus, sealed in Asgard, that could extend to the outer world, yet the opponent also had the concerns of Mount of the Gods in mind. Inexplicably somewhat excited, a trace of eagerness to test flashed in his eyes. As a deity born daring enough to steal Apollo's cattle, Hermes was never one to abide by rules. No hurry. I must first see what it is before deciding if I'll act. Taking a deep breath, Hermes pushed his projection to the fore. Deals with mortal peril are done, but no one engages in business at a loss. As the former god of commerce, I mustn't squander my capital. Wearing winged flying shoes, he opened the portal between two domains. Having made up his mind, Hermes no longer hesitated. Not rushing to act against the God King's weak semblance that seemed like a gust of wind could topple it, he merely created a projection of the sea god. Casually stirring up a small commotion, Hermes successfully drew Zeus's attention. After all, the ocean god system was located at the edge of the world, at the ocean's end, so their presence was quite plausible. And once anything happened in the future, the news of discovering the traces of the ocean god system could put the blame on them for him. Taking this opportunity with a flash, Hermes entered the fragment of this world. TSK, a bit tricky, shaking his head slightly, unlike Zeus. Having traversed between the real and the illusory world, even the materials for his divine artifact had elements mixed from the outer realms. For Hermes, the differing laws between interfaces weren't that hard to adapt to, at least for the majority of fragments already tainted by chaos. The only downside, probably, was that even using the wise man's stone to create projections, their dominion and power were greatly reduced here. Within chaos, information and imprints from the fantasy world could exercise a deity's dominion at 30%, only because the two were essentially one. In fact, without the presence of Lane, perhaps that world's trajectory would have been true destiny. But the Heminu fragments were different. For it, be it the fantasy world or the real chaos, both forces were foreign. In such circumstances, deities found it difficult to exercise dominion here. Hence Hermes' greatest reliance, the power of the wise man's stone, was rendered largely useless. With a casual trick, the god of thieves masked his presence. Shortly after arriving in this unfamiliar world, Hermes found the locals here. It's just that no matter how he looked at it, their current state seemed dire. Egyptians, with elegant, tall, and perfect attire, holding a silver scale at his fingertips. On both sides of the scale were gold coins and books. Blood rain was falling from the sky, and Hermes seemed to feel the world's lament. Even though it had long since died, with no chance of resurrection, much like a living being's head being severed, its body instinctively twitched. This was the world's final lamentation, and falling upon Hermes's ears, it was hard for him not to recall certain things. Just like me, similar to the fantasy world's destruction. Did you also encounter a destroyer? Or was it the world's own dissolution brought on by your own kind? Silently, Hermes traveled among these Egyptians. If it weren't for the wise man's stone enabling the projection of a quasi-deity, he would have liked to summon the shadow of Mnemosyne, the wife of the god king of the fantasy world, and mother of the 9 muse goddesses, an ancient Titan deity. With her strength as a blessing, he could easily read the memories of these mortals. Fortunately, after much wandering, Hermes found what he wanted in a broken temple. These were wall paintings and historical records, not gathered in Heliopolis, although the priests following the Egyptian high priest Qasim did not know what happened there. But they still recorded what they saw before the world's end, about the past of the Heminu world, their order and culture, the legends of the deities, and the end of it all. Browsing through it all, as he looked at everything, Hermes pondered. Beyond the fragments of the world, the endless void. A flash of divine light, eyes slightly opened. The projection was cancelled. Knowledge was retrieved. A hint of surprise flashed in Hermes's eyes. Then he looked towards the distant, illusory embodiment of the divine king. The destroyed alien realm, deities devouring each other? No wonder Zeus would appear here. If he were the divine king, he certainly wouldn't let it pass. The world's remnants can be fused into Asgard through the traction of sovereignty, and the mortals of the otherworld can be saved with the identity of a savior, further weakening the influence of generations of human creators in the mortal realm. If there were any divine remnants, that would be even better. In the chaos world, replicate the soul structures of Ka and Ba, attempting to elevate mortals directly to gods. This move would cause the entire mortal realm to bow down under the might of the divine king. Unfortunately, now that he himself has also discovered here, Hermes shook his head and smiled, resolutely deciding to return the filial piety. No choice. This is a traditional skill of the chaos world's deity race. Isn't this how divine kings have always been? And strictly speaking, you're not the Zeus from the fantasy world, so there's nothing connecting us. In 3 seconds, Hermes found an excuse and wiped the air. From the small pouch at his waist, hundreds of golden crystals of varying sizes instantly fell out. The light was dazzling, magnificent yet mysterious. Looking at them was like seeing countless mortals singing and praising. Reaching out, Hermes began to slowly extract the power within them. This was the energy he had prepared for a long time. Divine power crystals obtained through various means. Some came from faith gods, others from true gods, and some were even directly extracted by himself using a divine artifact. As a former god, having found his ascension path, even realizing part of it early and turning it into a divine artifact, Hermes had ways of observing and even utilizing the faith gathered upon him. However, he never intended to absorb their power, but rather he simply turned it into a drive to feed into the ability of the wise man's stone to summon deity projections. My own power is still too weak. Only external items can provide the consumption for its use. Luckily, Zeus's avatar is weak enough that consuming 1/10 of the reserves is sufficient to deal with him. Even though he felt that 1/10 seemed a bit excessive, for insurance, Hermes still did so. He continuously infused divine power into the wise man's stone, and in the next moment, as if from the depths of the world, an endless pressure accompanied the majestic figure slowly approaching. A trace of excitement flashed in his eyes. Since summoning the other side until now, this was the first time Hermes let it engage with an enemy. Who knows which of these two generations of divine kings is stronger? Crush him, he ordered in a low voice while Hermes himself hid aside. Although his projection from the fantasy world was not exactly the same as in the real world, for the ancient era of the first epic, the impact of both was really minimal. From a certain perspective, the Lord of the Sky summoned from the fantasy world might be even stronger, because at this moment, he was in the most peak state and wholly complete. The light and shadow flashed, the projection responded to the command. Stepping upon the void, the illusory sky undulated around him. Even if just a shadow, he remained the center of the world. Beyond the world's fragments, the place where the divine king's embodiment resided. Divine light flickered at his fingertips. A sequence was transmitted back to Olympus. In his calm expression, there was a hint of doubt. Zeus recalled his recent discovery. The divine power fluctuations from the void, possibly the figure of Oceanus, the god of the ocean, and the other's mysterious movements with a fleeting silhouette. All this inevitably aroused some suspicion in the divine king, yet he did not know exactly what he should pursue. Why did the other come to the void outside the world? What connection does this have with the Olympian pantheon? Zeus never restricted deities from venturing to places beyond the present world, nor did he have any reason to incite him to do so. Even more curiously, his own presence here seemed more perplexing, but fortunately, the other had ultimately left. Shaking his head slightly, the divine king refocused his attention on the world's fragment before him. Instinct told him this was the first, but certainly not the last. As long as he waited here, if he could find enough world fragments, regardless of other gains, merely these fragments themselves would be a huge fortune. I wonder how much the world's will would permit me to take to strengthen Asgard. After all, I'm also the Divine King. Taking 1 or 2 parts shouldn't be a problem, right? Not very clear, considering he was encountering this kind of situation for the first time. Stepping forward, the Divine King was just about to make contact with the embodiment within the fragments. However, at that moment his expression suddenly changed. Who, what? Boom! Turning suddenly before the crisis approached, Zeus ultimately sensed the danger. Thousands of chains of order intertwined into a net in an instant, materialized before him, blocking the enemy's power. But only moments later, in front of the Divine King, the net constructed by the chains of order shattered piece by piece, an irresistible force sweeping through the void. The azure sky trembled, supreme sunlight. It felt like the firmament was falling, bringing forth a myriad of splendors. In Zeus's incredulous eyes, a powerful fist broke through the air, striking straight at his face. Without any embellishment, neither the sky nor patriarchy itself is so fancy. They cannot be as changeable as wisdom, nor as ethereal as fate, and certainly not as all-powerful as sovereign under its dominion. When the two are combined, the sky and the masculine supreme become one, bringing with it ultimate power, indisputable strength. Uranus? How is this possible? Rumble. The figure exploded and recombined, repeating hundreds of times in an instant. The demigod embodiment itself has no physical form, so naturally, it does not require repairing the divine body. Until the body finally stabilized, Zeus looked in horror at the distant existence. What a joke! What did I just see? That image only seen in ancient sacrificial rituals, in the Oracle of Delphi. In Zeus's incredulous gaze, a powerful fist broke through the air, striking straight at his face. Without any embellishment, neither the sky nor patriarchy itself is so fancy. They cannot be as changeable as wisdom, nor as ethereal as fate, and certainly not as all-powerful as sovereign under its dominion. When the two are combined, the sky and the masculine supreme become one, bringing with it ultimate power, indisputable strength. Uranus? How is this possible? Rumble. The figure exploded and recombined, repeating hundreds of times in an instant. The demigod embodiment itself has no physical form, so naturally, it does not require repairing the divine body. Until the body finally stabilized, Zeus looked in horror at the distant existence. Beyond the world fragments, the endless void. A flash of divine light, the eyes gently opened. The projection was cancelled, knowledge reassumed, and a hint of surprise flickered in Hermes' eyes as he looked toward that illusory demigod embodiment. The destroyed alien realm, deities devouring each other? No wonder Zeus would appear here. If he were the Divine King, he would certainly not let it go either. The remnants of the world can be integrated into Asgard through the guidance of the sovereign. The mortals of the otherworld can be saved in the identity of the savior, further weakening the influence of previous human creators in the world. If there were further remnants of the deities, then all the better. In the Chaos world, replicating the Ka and Ba soul structures and attempting to directly elevate mortals to gods. With this move, the entire mortal realm would worship the might of the Divine King. It's a pity that now I've also discovered this. Shaking his head with a smile, Hermes decisively decides on filial piety. No choice, it's the traditional skill of the Chaos world deity race. Isn't that how all the divine kings have come over the ages? And to be fair, you're not that Zeus from the fantasy world, so there's no connection between us. Finding an excuse in 3 seconds, Hermes swipes the air. In a small pocket at his waist, hundreds of golden crystals of various sizes fell out in an instant. The light dazzling, magnificent, and mysterious. Looking at them, it's as if seeing countless mortals singing, praising. Reaching out to grasp them, Hermes begins to slowly draw out the power within. This is the energy he has prepared for a long time, divine power crystals obtained from various sources. Some come from faith gods, some from true gods, and some are simply extracted by himself with divine artifacts. As a once god who has found his path to ascension, and even realized part of it early, transforming it into an existence of a divine artifact, Hermes knows how to observe and even harness these faiths gathered upon him. He never intended to absorb their power, but simply converted it into motivation, to fill the capability of summoning deity projections through the wise man's stone. My own power is still too weak. Only external objects can provide consumption for its use. Fortunately, Zeus's embodiment is also weak enough. Consuming 1/10 of the reserves should be enough to deal with him, although feeling that 1/10 might be a bit excessive, but for safety's sake, Hermes still did so, continuously infusing divine power into the wise man's stone. The next moment, as if from the depths of the world, endless pressure accompanied by that majestic figure slowly approached. A trace of excitement flashed under his eyes. Since summoning the other party, this was the first time Hermes had allowed it to confront an enemy. I wonder which of these two generations of divine kings is stronger or weaker. Crush him. Softly ordering, Hermes hides to the side. Although the fantasy world him and the real world him are not exactly alike, for this ancient era of the first epoch, the influence of the two is indeed not significant. Even in a sense, the Lord of the Sky summoned from the fantasy world might be even stronger because he is at his peak and is complete. A flash of light shadow, the projection responds and moves. With the void beneath his feet, the illusory celestial dome rises and falls around him. Even if only a shadow, he remains the center of the world. Outside the world fragments where the demigod embodiment resides, divine light flickered at the fingertips. A sequential message was sent back to Olympus. With a calm expression tinged with some doubt, Zeus recalled the recent discovery. The divine power fluctuations from the void, the suspected figure of Oceanus, the god of the ocean, and the other's secretive movements, a blinking form. All this inevitably arouses some suspicion within the divine king, yet he doesn't know exactly what he should investigate. Why did the other party come to the void outside the world? What's the connection with the Olympian pantheon? Zeus has never restricted deities from going to places outside the mortal world, nor has he any reason to prompt him to do so. Even conversely, his presence here is more perplexing, but fortunately, the other party has ultimately left. Shaking his head slightly, the divine king once again focused his attention on the world fragments before him. His intuition told him this was the first but certainly not the last. If waiting here, finding enough world fragments, and not considering other gains, these fragments themselves are a sizable fortune. I wonder how much the will of the world will allow me to take to strengthen Asgard? After all, I am the divine king. Taking 1 or 2/10 shouldn't be a problem, right? Not very clear-headed, after all, this was his first encounter with such a situation. Stepping forward, the divine king was just about to communicate with the embodiment within the fragments. However, at that moment, his expression changed abruptly. Who, what? Boom! Suddenly turning around, before the crisis descended, Zeus ultimately sensed the danger. Thousands of chains of order wove into a net in an instant, materializing in front of him, blocking the enemy's power. But just moments later, appearing before the divine king, the net constructed by chains of order shattered inch by inch, unstoppable power swept the void. The blue sky trembles, the utmost yang supreme. Like the firmament descends, bringing forth 10,000 beams of brilliance. In Zeus's incredulous gaze, a powerful fist broke through the air, striking straight at his face. Without any embellishment, neither the sky nor patriarchy itself is so fancy. They cannot be as changeable as wisdom, nor as ethereal as fate, and certainly not as all-powerful as sovereign under its dominion. When the two are combined, the sky and the masculine supreme become one, bringing with it ultimate power, indisputable strength. Uranus? How is this possible? Rumble. The figure exploded and recombined, repeating hundreds of times in an instant. The demigod embodiment itself has no physical form, so naturally, it does not require repairing the divine body. Until the body finally stabilized, Zeus looked in horror at that existence in the distance. What a joke! What exactly did I see? That image only seen in the ancient rituals in the Delphi oracle. Within the fragments of the world once again entering. But this time, unlike before, Hermes chose to enter personally. The root of the wise man's stone is the half-finished door, and the construction of that door is the embodiment of the great alchemist's path to godhood. Thus, he could not allow the divine artifact to leave his control, even for a moment. The sorrow of the world, how authentic, stepping on the earth where red rain drizzled down, holding a white and holy stone, Hermes' spirit delved deep within. With the help of the divine artifact's power, his consciousness spread across the fragments of the domain, comprehending the origin of this dimension. The world is dead, there is no doubt about that. But from the perspective of the world itself, its death might have been instantaneous. Because at that moment, its past and future inevitably steered towards a doomed fate. Yet from the perspective of the beings within the realm, the traces of a world often linger for a long time. For instance, Asgard's past struggle, the residual information within the fantasy world. Even though in the real world, Chaos's fate had long been rewritten, all that was old turned into a false history, becoming the driving force for a divine artifact's ascension. Yet it left behind the information of its existence, which was passed into Hermes' surviving hands. And these things were the treasure the great alchemist truly wanted to obtain at this moment. History and concepts can be captured by people, origins can be annexed and divided by the world and destroyers, and perhaps in other fragments of the world, many deities might have also survived, just as I did. But there is one thing that the destroyers cannot take, because it is precisely what they destroyed with their own hands, and that is the world's original trajectory, the future that should have existed, akin to that of the fantasy world. They can never become reality. It is a symbol of failure, an inheritance only to be carried by those who are part of the same failure. If not for the wise man's stone, if not for the unique rules of this world, I fear I could only be guarding an empty treasure mountain, sighing at the ocean. Once again near the settlement of the Egyptian remnants, Hermes had already sensed that vague information. That short information depicted the script Hermenu world's fate had written for itself. No contact with the outer god, not eroded by other worlds. Under the world's spontaneous operation, Horus descends into the mortal realm, reigning as the monarch on earth. The dynasty of the Egyptians passed down from generation to generation, the rise of Thebes and the decline of Heliopolis. Though the fragments only contained broken information, Hermes nevertheless deciphered much knowledge and laws starkly different from chaos. This was useless to ordinary people, but for the wise man's stone and the door he wished to construct, it was a priceless foundation. If this progress continued and he absorbed enough information, Hermes could even pull out several new incarnations from the wise man's stone, manifesting the projections of Egyptian deities. Of course, all of this was based on the premise that he not only needed to perceive the existence of information, but also be able to accept them. Fortunately, the gods of Hermenu could originally devour each other, and strictly speaking, Hermes and the current worldly laws of chaos were indeed a layer apart. As survivors of a world's destruction, there is no harm in giving me what you left behind. After all, in a sense, if in the future I can ascend to great divine power, and perhaps climb continuously along this path, you might also live again in an unconventional way. A world of such grandeur shouldn't have such rigid definitions of life and death. Stepping into the Egyptian settlement, Hermes made no attempt to hide his presence. Moments later, someone indeed noticed his whereabouts. "Who's there? Wait, who are you? Stop, don't come any closer." Whiz! An arrow sliced through the air and embedded itself into the ground before Hermes. Behind a distant wooden shelter, a skinny, ragged Egyptian watched nervously. In such an environment, in this fractured world, beings like Hermes, resplendent and untouched by filth, had long vanished. Stimulated by the commotion, more figures emerged from various places. Seeing this scene, the great alchemist merely spread his hands and smiled. Food. As the words landed, the red rain falling from the sky blurred for a moment, transforming into a shower of barley and wheat. With the enhancement of the wise man's stone and its projection of Draupner, Hermes easily performed alchemy that could be called transmutation, turning raindrops into food. Eyes widened, the Egyptians who hadn't seen a divine miracle in a long time were frozen in place. Smiling again, the great alchemist waved his hand, applying a layer of filter to himself. As you see, children of Egypt, the world is in ruin. All gods have fallen. But there are always survivors. I was once a gnome deity of a city-state, safeguarding the peace of the city. But disaster turned it to history, granting me the opportunity to become a new god. Now I, Culine Hermes Thoth, will shelter you in the name of God, establishing my own Laru here. Are you willing to accept my protection, to offer me your faith, to give me the respect and devotion once shown to the 9 pillar gods? Without lying, Hermes considered that Athens' national guardian mage could also be understood as a guardian deity. Culine was where he was once born in the fantasy world, while Thoth was the Hemenu god whose various powers aligned most closely with his own. As for Laru, it's a term in Egyptian culture for a type of afterworld, similar to some spirit realms, bearing some resemblance to the divine kingdom. In the Egyptians' understanding, gnome gods, guardian deities, from various places had the ability to establish Laru, temporarily housing the souls of the deceased. In this respect, Hermes could also weave a temporary illusion to allow these souls from the alien realm to persist. In such Ka and Ba soul structures, he had long been curious. Studying chaos soul might inadvertently make one a blasphemer, so scrutinizing the souls of otherworldly beings seemed harmless. Considering these Egyptians might become his future believers, Hermes only intended to conduct shallow research on them. As for the deeper aspects, it was rumored that there were other beings in this world fragment. So, tell me your decision. Agree or refuse? We are willing. Bang! They prostrated in worship, as though finding a bottle of water in the desert. Facing Hermes, the surviving Egyptians hardly resisted. Their past faith was already like this, and the devouring among gods was commonplace. A gnome deity named Hermes inheriting Thoth's legacy. Was this strange? Not at all. The only issue worth noting was probably that no one had heard of the name Culine, but faced with life and death, such trivial matters drew no concern. From that day forth, within this world fragment, the Egyptians had their own god. Natural disasters remained powerful, and conditions were still harsh. But in front of the successor of the former god of writing, wisdom, and magic, Thoth, these problems were not really problems. Gradually, having been saved in despair, the Egyptians' faith grew increasingly devout and fervent. And as their object of worship, the boundary between Hermes and this fragmented world became increasingly tenuous. Until one day, he projected a real gnome god from the wise man's stone. And this fabricated concept truly manifested in reality. Indeed, it is peculiar. Divide the soul into parts carrying inherent nature, beastly desires, and consciousness, and parts used to receive godhood, power, and strength. Ultimately, this structure allows mastery of strength and the bearing of mighty godhood authority without personal impact. This structure might be replicable into a meditation method for the cultivation of future spellcasters inheriting from me. Thoughtful, as he considered his future path, it became increasingly clear with the casting of the wise man's stone. Upon his own deification, he was almost certain to establish a school, one originating from his path to godhood, allowing successors to build upon it while remaining innately integrated. With each new branch, he would grow stronger. With each person who became a god through this, the symbol he aimed to construct would reach a greater state of perfection. In a sense, it might make some sense why followers of that former Lord of Hell called him Little Divine King. Though Hermes' path was essentially unconcerned with collective associations, those would-be gods who fell again had little relation to him, but indeed, their paths did converge. In such a case, this soul structure, which significantly reduced the cost for mortals to touch divine power, proved useful. From the perspective of the Hemenu gods, this structure was flawed. But from a mortal's perspective, wasn't it also an inherent talent? Hermes slightly turned his head, gazing into the distance, and after a moment, withdrew his gaze. Another conflict between Egyptians and those they called Sin people. For such trivial matters, the great alchemist paid no heed. In such dire conditions, their conflicts wouldn't amount to much chaos. Speaking of which, what would happen if I brought Amun-Ra here? With the same name, could he acquire part of the legacy of the Egyptian divine king Amun-Ra? A sudden thought crossed his mind, but after considering it for a moment, Hermes set the idea aside. If the opposing party truly received the legacy of great divine power, he might not be able to overpower it. Best to wait. These dangerous experiments were better saved for after becoming a god. Meanwhile, as Hermes came to change the Egyptians' plight, in a dim cavern, Rudas silently completed his daily prayers, appreciating the grace of the deities and expressing his doubts. For some time now, for reasons unknown, the once frequent divine miracles had grown obscure. Although he could still sustain himself, Rudas failed in his plan to proclaim among his kin that he was also a prophet of divine revelation. Of course, a mortal's inability to fathom divine will was commonplace. Rudas did not harbor any negative emotions for this, considering it his own failure to grasp the deity's intention. However, the recent commotion from the Egyptians left him uneasy. Those vile lower-class people, those shameless thieves. Their god had stolen the master's light, and they themselves occupied everything granted to the Hebrews by the master. Now, those sinful deities weren't completely destroyed, yet they dared to rise again. Dangerous. It's best not to approach there for now. I uphold the deity's will, destined to bring glory to the master. Hence, I cannot die here. Even if I must die, it should be for something more worthwhile. Justifying his retreat in his heart, Rudas hid inside the cavern. Who are you? The broken world has no sun, moon, or stars, but remnants of day and night rules linger. After all, Hemenu world's deities are not numerous, and the division of power isn't too complicated. Reflecting in reality, although most of the main deities of the world have fallen, one can still see changes in heavenly light within these fragments, distinguishing day from night. On this day, after completing his prayers, Rudas fell into a deep sleep. Half dreaming, half awake, he vaguely remembered following a person emitting golden light. They crossed a long stretch of dark land and arrived at an unfamiliar realm. Here there were sun, moon, and stars, ocean and earth, and many never-before-seen beings. Who are you? Asked again, indistinguishable between illusion and reality. Rudas's consciousness seemed slightly blurred. In front of him, that golden light. Who are you? The broken world has no sun, moon, or stars, but remnants of day and night rules linger. After all, Hemenu world's deities are not numerous, and the division of power isn't too complicated. Reflecting in reality, although most of the main deities of the world have fallen, one can still see changes in heavenly light within these fragments, distinguishing day from night. On this day, after completing his prayers, Rudas fell into a deep sleep. Half dreaming, half awake, he vaguely remembered following a person emitting golden light. They crossed a long stretch of dark land and arrived at an unfamiliar realm. Here there were sun, moon, and stars, ocean and earth, and many never-before-seen beings. Who are you? Asked again, indistinguishable between illusion and reality. Rudas's consciousness seemed slightly blurred. In front of him, that golden figure just smiled, as if lamenting mortal ignorance. This is Heaven Mountain, the dwelling of the gods, and the place where the holy spirits who serve the gods reside. The voice was calm, although this was a name Zeus just made up, it wasn't made at random. In his impression, believers of Themis, the goddess of law, often presided over justice and maintained fairness in the mortal realm. Faced with those stubborn individuals who resisted through violence, they sometimes used force, summoning some holy spirits from the Seven Hills Paradise to aid in battle. Regarding this place, the divine king doesn't know much. But Zeus liked the name 7 Hills Paradise. Paradise, heaven, what a pleasant name. But after all, this name has been used by others elsewhere, so the Divine King can't give the Asgard a similar title. Fortunately, this is a fragment of an alien realm, so these concerns need not be considered. Moreover, using Heaven Mountain to refer to Mount Olympus has another benefit, that no one would associate it with him. The dwelling of gods? Heaven Mountain? He exclaimed softly, even though his mind was still a bit muddled. Rudas, immersed in his dream, felt quite amazed. In past Heminu, he had never heard of such a place. So, are you a god? He asked. It depends on how you interpret it. After a slight pause, Zeus then said, in the eyes of some existences I might be, but in the eyes of the Creator you worship, who founded Heaven Mountain, I am not. However, whether I am a god is not important. What matters is, mortal, do you know why you came into this world? I don't know. People in dreams often struggle to concentrate, so when Zeus changed the subject, Rudas followed suit to ponder the question. But as he said, he didn't know what he came into this world to do. To most people, existence itself is a meaning. What more reasons could there be? Since you don't know, let me tell you. Not letting him ponder too long, Zeus slowly gave his answer. Unlike your other kind, you came into this world with a mission. The divine entrusted you with a heavy task. He had chosen you even before you were born. He wants you to spread his name in this world, to make him be in the mortal realm as he is in heaven. As you can see, this is your mission. The voice was calm. Zeus continued walking ahead. Though they never met, he already arranged an identity for the alien deity he plans to replace. Just like Prometheus, perhaps he wasn't born as a powerful god, which is why he was punished by the alien god king, and even the humans he created became sin people. But before the world-ending calamity, he evidently gained immeasurable benefits, allowing him not only to break free but also to seize the authority following Heminu gods' mutual devouring rules, becoming as great as the alien god king. And in the end, hidden behind all things, he was actually the incarnation of the Chaos God King from the very beginning, including creating these humans, protecting them in the world's destruction calamity, and all subsequent events were thus. From start to finish, all these changes stemmed from one thing, that is, the great Zeus's will. It didn't matter if others believed, as Zeus himself believed. My mission. Yes. Without turning back, walking on this false heaven mountain, the divine king moved with intent. The holy light and clouds that permeated the sky slowly dispersed. This was the most perfect scene he had ever imagined. Along ancient stone paths, shadows on the mountain peak emitted blinding light. Along the mountain path, countless gods and beings are offering gifts to the supreme monarch. At the edge of the sky, several vast illusions also pay homage to Mount of the Gods. As you can see, he is the Lord of the divine domain, the King of Kings. All things in the world should belong to him, and you are the saint spreading the gospel. The divine king spoke thus, exhausting all the praises he could think of at that moment. As the sole listener, his heart swayed. Rudas at this moment could barely contain himself. As a believer, he had imagined countless times what the deity would look like in his mind. But humans cannot imagine something they have not encountered. So even in dreams, he had never seen such a grand spectacle. Yet now all of this was happening before his eyes. I understand. Taking a deep breath, in a daze, looking at the scene before him, Rudas remembered the indescribable magnificent sight he vaguely saw at the time of worldly destruction. The sky was collapsing, the earth was shattering, and all things were wailing. And above the dome, amidst this scene of world ending, there seemed to be an existence that glanced at the mortal realm. Rudas did not know who it was, nor was it the Lord worshipped by the Hebrews. But before experiencing the recent divine miracles, he had always regarded it as his source of persistence. Everything is your will. Praise be to you, the Master of all things. I shall uphold your will and deliver your holy name to the nations of the mortal realm. Speaking piously, Rudas was focused. Even though just now, when he thought of that gaze, everything in front of him changed in an instant. Golden light turned into black mist, all gods transformed into demons. Even the divine person guiding him here transformed into a dragon serpent-like body, growing more than one dragon head on its neck, topped with crooked and sinister horn plates. However, for Rudas, who has never understood the hundred-headed dragons and serpents Typhon and Abyss Demon, this is perhaps terrifying but not out of place. Even if he knew these things, he would not feel puzzled about it. Is not the Lord just like that? He is an all-seeing entity, both kind and evil. He can be perfect and he can fall. Thus, he is the source and faith of the Hebrews and can also unleash 10 plagues, bestowing upon the mortal realm unimaginable calamities. Understanding him from a mortal's perspective is itself an error. Perhaps the Lord is just using this way to convey his will and narrate his true nature and the beginning and end of the human world. Very good. Nodding in satisfaction, Zeus slowly opened his mouth and said, "Go. I'll be watching over you. I will protect your life, giving you the dawn of hope on your path when you encounter hardships." Just like that, these are the believers I want. Even though what's in front of him isn't Zeus's true body, nor is the mortal's faith in himself. Yet, based on his millennia of experience, Zeus could immediately see the piety in the person before him. Indeed, such humans are good humans, believing himself to be their creator, and unlike the bronze humanity made by Prometheus, neither shameless nor greedy. As his thoughts moved, Zeus intensified the golden light effects he released. He let Heaven Mountain cast its shadow on the earth, depicting all kinds of greed, tyranny, torture, and conflict. The beauty of heaven and the sins of the mortal world once again mirrored each other, and all of it originated from the thought of the god. In such a scene, the divine king smiled slightly, like a greedy dragon drooling. He stretched out his hand and gently pushed, sending the mortal in front of him away from this false illusion. This is the future he envisioned, but there's much to do to achieve this future, and the person in front of him is one of them. Even without considering the subsequent schemes, merely the faith of these alien humans is enough for him to accomplish many things. Chaos, the mortal realm. On Mount Olympus, in the empty golden palace, the void trembled, and the figure of Zeus gathered and arose. Subconsciously covering his chest, the divine king reminisced about the feeling just now. As a manifestation, he was mercilessly slain at the world's edge. Only because the environment there didn't suit the existence of sovereignty, his power couldn't unfold. But correspondingly, lacking power also meant that being destroyed would not cause too much consequence. The power of sovereignty has long spread throughout the world, even though most are either trapped in Asgard or used to erode the starry sky and netherworld. The remaining portion is still enough for him to gather a manifestation. After a long while, his eyes closed and reopened, Zeus stepped out of the golden palace alone, looking up at the sky above. Shortly after, a thought was sent forth. After the sound of howling wind, the god of west wind, Zephyrus, paid a respectful salute, expressing his reverence to the divine king. "Your Majesty, did you call for me?" Nodding slightly, Zeus asked, "How much do you know about the first epic?" "Ah!" With a shocked expression, Zephyrus did not expect to be asked this question. "The first epic, that's too ancient." After pondering for a moment, he shook his head helplessly. "Your Majesty, it's not that I'm unwilling to answer your question. It's truly my understanding of the first epic is very limited. As you can see, I am a third-generation Titan's god. From a ranking perspective, you're a generation above me. Of course, as the pioneer of the new divine court, you are the beginning of the Olympian pantheon, without needing to adhere to the Titan's order. But to me, the first epic is only an era that exists in legends. What I know doesn't exceed yours by much. Strictly speaking, apart from the first-hand experiencers of that era, not many know about the events that transpired back then." Nodding slightly, although he was mentally prepared before calling Zephyrus, Zeus was still somewhat disappointed. However, he could understand the other party's situation because even the second-generation Titans have few among them who know much about the first epic. For no other reason, the entire first epic was experienced only by the primordial gods, Heavenly Father and Earth Mother, Ancient Sea God, ancient mountain god, several titans, and the 12 titans deities. Needless to say about the first 5 entities, whether by ignoring worldly matters, being in eternal slumber, or opposing the divine court. As for why the 12 titans didn't mention those past events, it's something understandable upon slight consideration. Thousands of years of existence, either used as toys or punching bags, they lived perpetually in Heavenly Father's shadow. In the end, they were forced to return to Mother Earth's womb, nearly maintaining the state between life and death eternally. Regarding these matters, Zeus didn't know much, but he knew some. Even if it were him, he wouldn't like to constantly bring up these dark tidings either. It's a pity. I remember Helios knew quite a bit about that era, but he has already fallen. If you, Your Majesty, want to learn about that era's events, you still need to meet with the Titan main god. Of course, if you have other concerns, that's beyond my consideration. Slightly bowing, the god of West Wind didn't speak the truth. Strictly speaking, he knows a little about that era. For example, certain rumors he inquired from Helios, like how the ancient lord of the spirit realm once did something that caused quite a loss to the second-generation god king and ancient sun god. But as time passed, the god of West Wind suddenly found that many deeds from that era inexplicably got forgotten. Even among deities, none mentioned them. Only he remembered them clearly, even able to depict specific deeds, but Zephyrus very obeyingly chose silence, as if he didn't remember it either. Just kidding, though the god of West Wind serves as a loyal minister to the god king for a whole epoch, no one truly believes him to be a faithful deity, right? Even Cronus didn't think this back then. Zeus is thinking too nicely. Getting him to do things is simple. But if the danger is too great, he is also quite unable. I know. Your loyalty is in my eyes. Go down, and I will not treat you poorly. Slightly nodding, Zeus didn't say anything, just waved his hand, indicating the other could leave. Among 10 rooms, there must be one with loyalty. Though Chaos might not have this phrase, there are similar words. On Mount Olympus, finding it impossible to gather information from the god of West Wind, the divine king decided to leave. Upon careful reflection, among the ancient Titans deities, he still had one he could communicate with. The goddess of luminous, Phoebe, whom he had previously ordered to oversee the god of stars in the zodiacal star domain. He wondered how things had fared since. Since that day, Zeus hadn't received much news concerning her, so it was apt to take a look now. But before leaving, after a moment of contemplation, the divine king softly called out, "Iris, Your Majesty!" A rainbow light flashed, and the goddess of rainbow appeared before the golden palace. "Iris, there is no need to wait any longer. Announce my command. Reveal to all gods what Zephyrus once saw in Silver Moon City. The deity race suffered desecration, which is a disgrace to the divine king. Yet, if the divine king is disgraced, the gods might feel similarly. Let them do something in their own way. Consider it a rehearsal for the future. No matter what they do, I'll be watching over them from the Mount of the Gods. As you wish, Your Majesty." With a slight bow, the goddess of rainbow hesitated upon hearing these words. "I will carry out your will, but regarding this matter, Silver Moon City seems to have its own say as well. Moreover, not every deity may be willing to do something for others if—" "No, Iris, you've misunderstood my intentions." With a slight shake of the head, Zeus said with profound intent, "At this point, the truth of this matter no longer matters. Whether it's those mortals wielding witchcraft or the long-imprisoned god of the stars. In the end, they are but minor figures, unable to affect the final outcome. But fundamentally, regardless of what the truth is, Iris, tell me. Even if it wasn't witnessed by you personally, even if it was fabricated out of thin air, if you were to choose, whose words would you believe?" "Naturally, I would trust you, my majesty." With an enlightened expression, the goddess of rainbow appeared convinced. Indeed, Zeus's order wasn't about accomplishing anything, nor was it to rely on the god's strength to flatten that city. His aim was simply to distinguish friend from foe before the final moment. prompting the fence-sitters to make their choice. Either believe his words and do something in the mortal realm, firmly standing against the ancient gods of the spirit realm alongside the king of Olympus, or disbelieve his words and become his enemy. There was no need to wait until the last moment. Zeus could sort them out now. Once this step was completed, the power of the gods on the Mount of the Gods would naturally unite. For the divine king, his aim would thus be accomplished. Her figure flickering, rainbow lights suddenly appeared, and the goddess of rainbow departed directly. This was no difficult task for her, merely taking a few days to complete. Yet, even as a messenger, Iris sensed a certain aura of slaughter. Perhaps this world wouldn't remain stable for much longer. The divine king's avatar traveled to the stars, exploring the secrets of the first era and the past of the ancient lord of the sky. He hoped to find some more concrete evidence, to discern the origin of the one who summoned the shadow of the celestial gods. Meanwhile, within the mortal world, rainbow lights scattered, as Iris traversed the wilderness, stirring waves anew. On this day, divine light descended, and the goddess of rainbow entered a town in the mortal realm. It was far from the human core, situated between wilderness and the mundane. Surveying the city's structure, Iris felt a sense of antiquity here. Whether customs or architecture, they seemed frozen in time from thousands of years ago. The people built bricks and houses with stones, gathering around the sacred fire, avoiding disasters amidst the wilderness. Truly primitive, even their faith is so. Gently shaking her head, Iris traversed the entire town without seeing any substantial temple. The only hall worshipped ancient gods of the old era, Titans, deities who have run their course, divided, or are in eternal rest. They had placed the 12 ancient gods in prominent positions in the temple, with symbols of the progeny of gods embellished around them. Vaguely, almost mistaking it, Iris even glimpsed the statue of the former divine king, Cronus, honored in the last seat as a progeny alongside thunder god Zeus. Arrogant fanatics, this was the only opinion the goddess of rainbow had of the builders of this temple. Yet, after hesitating for a moment, she ultimately did nothing. After all, coming to the city, her purpose was to seek the divine king's eldest sister, the goddess of Heathfire, Hestia, fond of transforming into a mortal and traveling the mortal realm. Throughout the entire deity race, perhaps this highness was one of the gods most closely related to humans. More than once had she appeared on the edge of the human world, aiding them in repelling demons, sealing evil creatures, saving those mortals on the edge of the wilderness. In comparison, even though Artemis holds the godhood of wilderness, she mostly teaches her believers various survival skills, rather than proactively solving their problems. Survival of the fittest is the law of the wilderness, and also the doctrine firmly believed by the believers of Artemis. Iris couldn't say who was right or wrong, but in terms of the number of followers on the edge of the wilderness, the goddess of Heathfire indeed had a slight advantage. But speaking of which, since Hestia cares so little about this, why should I meddle? Perhaps this guardian of the home intentionally crafted the statue of the former divine king. After all, the gods are undying, and compared to the eternally resting Heavenly Father, who knows where Lord Cronus watches the world from. On this day, the divine light descended, and the goddess of rainbow walked into a mortal town. This place was far from the core of humanity, situated at the edge of the wilderness and the secular world. Observing the structure of the city, Iris felt that it was somewhat ancient. Whether customs or architecture, they seemed to belong to millennia ago. People used stones to build bricks and houses, gathering around the sacred fire to escape the disasters of the wilderness. How primitive! Even faith is like this. Shaking her head slightly, Iris walked around the entire town but saw no large-scale temple. The only hall worshipped the ancient gods of the old era, the Titan deities who had long either fled, split, or slumbered. They placed 12 ancient gods in the temple's important positions, adorned with symbols of all gods' offspring. Vaguely, almost thinking she was mistaken, Iris saw the statue of the previous divine King Cronus, already accompanying in a subordinate role to thunder god Zeus at the lowest seat. Audacious renegades, This was the rainbow goddess's only view of the builders of this temple. However, after hesitating for a moment, she ultimately did nothing. After all, her purpose in coming to the city was to find the goddess of Heathfire, Hestia, the divine king's elder sister, who loved to transform into a mortal and travel the mortal realm. Looking around the entire deity race, perhaps this princess was among the gods most closely connected with humans. She had manifested at the edges of the human world more than once, helping them fend off demons, seal evil creatures, and save these mortals at the wilderness's border. In comparison, even though Artemis held the godhood of the wild, she mostly taught her believers various survival techniques rather than actively solving their problems. Survival of the fittest, the law of the jungle, this is the rule of the wilderness, and also the doctrine Artemis's believers firmly believe in. Iris couldn't say who was right or wrong, but in terms of the number of believers on the edge of the wilderness, the goddess of Heathfire indeed had a slight advantage. But speaking of which, since even Lady Hestia doesn't care much about this, why should I? Perhaps this guardian of the home intentionally crafted the statue of the previous divine king. After all, the gods are undying, and compared to the eternally slumbering heavenly Father, who knows where his majesty Cronus is watching the world from. On Mount Olympus, seeing that he could not obtain information from the god of West Wind, the divine king immediately decided to leave. Thinking carefully, among the old Titan deities, there was still one with whom he could communicate. The goddess of luminous, Phoebe, who was previously instructed by him to watch over the god of stars in the zodiacal star domain, though the current situation was unknown. Since that day, Zeus hadn't received much news related to her, so he decided to go and see now. But before leaving, after a brief contemplation, the divine king softly called out, "Iris, your majesty!" A rainbow light flashed, and the goddess of rainbow appeared before the golden palace. "Iris, you need not wait any longer. Convey my order. Announce to all gods what Zephyrus once saw in Silver Moon City. The deity race suffered desecration, which is certainly a humiliation for the divine king. But with the divine king humiliated, I suppose the gods will also empathize. Let them do something in their own manner, and take it as a prelude to the future. No matter what they choose to do, on the Mount of the Gods, I will always be watching them. As you wish, your majesty." Bowing slightly, the rainbow goddess hesitated a bit upon hearing this. "I will fulfill your will, but regarding this matter, Silver Moon City seems to have its own version. Moreover, not every god may be willing to do something for others. No, Iris, you haven't understood what I mean." Shaking his head slightly, Zeus said with profound meaning, "At this point, the truth of the matter no longer matters. Whether it be mortals mastering witchcraft, or the god of stars imprisoned for millennia. In the end, they are just small characters, unable to influence the outcome. But ultimately, regardless of the truth, Iris, tell me, even if it was not what you saw firsthand, even if it was just fabricated, if you had to choose, whose words would you believe?" "Naturally, it would be you, my majesty." With a sudden realization, the rainbow goddess found no further argument. Indeed, Zeus's order wasn't to achieve some end, nor to crush that city with the power of the gods. It was merely to distinguish friend from foe before the critical moment, forcing those on the fence to make a choice. Either believe in his words, do something in the mortal realm, completely opposing the spirit realm's ancient gods and standing with the divine king of Olympus, or not believe him and be his enemy. If the latter, Zeus could deal with them right now, not waiting for the last moment. Once this step was complete, the power of the gods on the Mount of the Gods would naturally coalesce. For the divine king, his goal would be achieved. With a flicker, the rainbow light flashed, and the goddess of rainbow left straightforwardly. This task was not difficult for her and could be completed in a few days. Yet, even as a messenger, Iris sensed a certain murderous aura. Perhaps this world could only remain stable for a few more days. The divine king's avatar headed to the stars, seeking the secrets of the first era and the past of the ancient lord of the sky. He hoped to find more concrete evidence to uncover the origins of one who summons shadows of the celestial gods. And on the mortal earth, as rainbow light scattered, Iris traversed the wilderness, stirring up waves of turmoil. On this day, the divine light descended, and the goddess of rainbow walked into a mortal town. This place was far from the core of humanity, situated at the edge of the wilderness and the secular world. Observing the structure of the city, Iris felt that it was somewhat ancient. Whether customs or architecture, they seemed to belong to millennia ago. People used stones to build bricks and houses, gathering around the sacred fire to escape the disasters of the wilderness. How primitive! Even faith is like this. Shaking her head slightly, Iris walked around the entire town but saw no large-scale temple. The only hall worshipped the ancient gods of the old era, the Titan deities who had long either fled, split, or slumbered. They placed 12 ancient gods in the temple's important positions, adorned with symbols of all gods' offspring. Vaguely, almost thinking she was mistaken, Iris saw the statue of the previous divine King Cronus, already accompanying in a subordinate role to thunder god Zeus at the lowest seat. Audacious renegades, this was the rainbow goddess's only view of the builders of this temple. However, after hesitating for a moment, she ultimately did nothing. After all, her purpose in coming to this city was to find the goddess of Heathfire, Hestia, the divine king's elder sister, who loved to transform into a mortal and travel the mortal realm. Looking around the entire deity race, perhaps this princess was among the gods most closely connected with humans. She had manifested at the edges of the human world more than once, helping them fend off demons, seal evil creatures, and save these mortals at the wilderness's border. In comparison, even though Artemis held the godhood of the wild, she mostly taught her believers various survival techniques rather than actively solving their problems. Survival of the fittest, the law of the jungle, this is the rule of the wilderness, and also the doctrine Artemis's believers firmly believe in. Iris couldn't say who was right or wrong, but in terms of the number of believers on the edge of the wilderness, the goddess of Heathfire indeed had a slight edge. But speaking of it, since even Lady Hestia doesn't care much about it, why should I bother? Perhaps this guardian of the home intentionally crafted the statue of the previous divine king. After all gods are undying, compared to the eternally sleeping Heavenly Father, who knows where His Majesty Cronus is watching the world. Outside, the rain was falling harder and harder. Silently waiting inside the house, Iris wasn't in a good mood. Waiting for others was something she had always done a lot of. But waiting for mortals, this was the first time she had done that. If it weren't for Hestia being by her side, the goddess of rainbow would never waste time for a handful of humans. Fortunately, just as she began to grow impatient, the wooden door finally sounded a knock. Knock, knock, knock. Come in, the door's not locked. Creak. The not-so-sturdy wooden door was pushed open, and a young man with a straight posture walked in. If she wasn't mistaken, he should be the Mephisto that the goddess of Heathfire mentioned. Looking past him, a hint of surprise flashed in Iris's eyes. Behind him, the so-called elder didn't look all that old. Judging by appearance, he looked more like a seasoned middle-aged man, with only a pair of blood-red eyes being somewhat uncommon. However, the goddess of rainbow wasn't surprised by this. For some unknown reason, she felt the person in front of her seemed somewhat familiar. It was as if she had seen him when he was young, but on careful recollection, she couldn't find any impression. You're late. Didn't anyone teach you that visits should be announced beforehand? Speaking lightly, without much thought, Iris tossed aside the familiar feeling. Perhaps she really had seen him somewhere, the sage of the human kingdom, and in front of her, in the place unnoticed by the goddess of rainbow, Mephisto, who stepped in, also felt a flicker of surprise in his heart. Is this Iris? With a slight flicker in his eyes, facing the other's questioning, Mephisto only smiled and countered. Madam, may I ask in what capacity you are questioning me? As a guest, is that not allowed? Slightly stunned, the goddess of rainbow decisively replied. As a punctual guest, I naturally don't like people like you who have no concept of time. I suppose there's no problem with that. Of course, there's no problem. With an unchanged smile, Mephisto gently shook his head. It's just that guests should do what guests are meant to do. They shouldn't make decisions for the host, because they simply can't make the right choice. Just like now. Madam, I am very curious how you concluded that we are late when clearly there's still half a water clock's time before our agreed time? But I think perhaps there is some misunderstanding between us that has made you prejudiced against me. If that is indeed the case, then please allow me to offer you my apologies and make amends for any unintentional offense I may have caused. Unable to respond, Iris had to admit, this is indeed a very polite young man. Pouting, she no longer tried to pick a fight with him. The goddess of Rainbow gave the elder, beside him, a brief glance, yet said nothing further. All right, everything's ready. Youngsters, you've arrived, I see. As the room grew somewhat quiet, Hestia came in from the back kitchen, carrying a large basket of dried fruit. Of course, she heard the argument inside the house, but Iris's dissatisfaction with waiting for humans was a common trait among the gods. Shaking her head silently, the goddess of Huthfire laid out the prepared food on the table. Just as she was about to say something, she looked up to see the middle-aged man in front of her, and for a moment, she too was a bit dazed. What is it? Nothing. It's just that this gentleman. You remind me of an old acquaintance. Forcing a smile, Hestia took a deep breath and put her various associations back in her mind. Maybe it's because this place is so special. After all, this town isn't far from there. Without more thought, the goddess of Huthfire called upon the guests who had arrived. Time has flown by, so many years have passed. Some of those ancient past events, even she can barely recall. The evening banquet was ordinary, nothing special about it. Neither Mephisto nor the two goddesses displayed anything unusual. Until the heavy rain in the sky gradually stopped. At the wooden house's door, the people exchanged farewells, letting out an unconscious sigh of relief and then feeling somewhat inexplicably odd. The goddess of Rainbow didn't know what was wrong with her today, why she cared so much about the comings and goings of these two humans. Good thing they had already gone. She should also complete her task. Turning to bow, Iris communicated the Divine King's command to the goddess of Huthfire. This is it. His Majesty hopes that all the gods will do something in the mortal realm to punish those humans who blaspheme the deities. Of course, Your Highness, you can decide freely. Whether or not to do it, I think Zeus will not object. Is that so? Frowning in thought, Hestia sighed in response. Things have indeed come to this. The flames of war spreading among the gods. Not long ago, she was also aware of the upheaval on the Mount of the Gods. Under the unshakable will of the Divine King, Olympus and the spirit realm have ultimately arrived at this point. Despite not wanting to participate, as Zeus's sister, Hestia couldn't stand aloof from it all. Yet on that day when she was about to go, someone stopped her. For the guardian of the home, as the eldest of Zeus's 6 siblings, no one could stop her from helping her family. But that person was different. When she spoke to the goddess, Hestia ultimately chose to listen. And since that day, she has remained here. In fact, it was because of this that she tended to the shrine that worshipped the Titans. Iris, tell Zeus, if it ever comes to a life and death moment between us, I will help him. But before that, my attitude remains unchanged. As eternal deities, taking a step back is not necessarily a bad thing. If Father God had faced the shift in destiny and the change of the Divine King position with composure, perhaps there would never have been the Titan War, nor the subsequent separation. This, with a hesitant tone, the goddess of Rainbow did not know how to respond to Hestia's words. Mortals can turn against brothers or spouses over a piece of gold, let alone the position of Divine King, the supreme power in the world. I will convey Your Highness's message. Speaking slowly, Iris could only do this much. By the way, besides this, there is one more thing. His Majesty hopes you can visit some hermit deities when you have time to see if they can agree to matters related to the First Age, especially the Lord of the Sky. His Majesty is very concerned about this. What? Her expression changed, as if she had heard something unbelievable, but she quickly returned to normal. Slowly nodding, Hestia said nothing more. Understood. I will keep an eye on this matter. Good. Then I won't stay any longer. With a slight bow, Iris then took her leave. Moments later, as the heavy rain came to a complete stop, a colorful rainbow arched across the sky. The goddess continued to carry out her tasks, while Hestia remained in the small town, standing by the window for a moment, as if digesting the conversation she just heard. The goddess of Hoothfire quietly tidied up the dining utensils in the room, without using any supernatural powers during the process. She tried to calm her inner turmoil by doing this, yet after an indefinite period, she came out of her daze and sighed again. Escaping won't solve the problem, although she could never quite reconcile with Zeus' decision. But no matter what, he was her brother. So, staring at the rain-washed town for a long time, a flash of fire ignited beside her. In the next moment, a uniquely shaped blade materialized in Hestia's hand. It was a sickle, but unlike the agricultural tool for harvesting wheat, it exuded an ancient and wild murderous aura. The naturally formed stone body cast from flint bore mottled bloodstains, reminiscent of an ancient history. Indeed, it was a witness to an epic and a divine weapon capable of threatening a divine king. The nameless scythe, Chaos's first weapon, the first post-heavenly created and uncrafted divine artifact. Grasping its hilt, Hestia felt a powerful force transmitting to her body. An era has passed, yet this naturally formed divine artifact seemed to have grown stronger for some reason. Even when not facing its destined opponent, its might could still terrify all gods. Mother Goddess, I'm afraid I will disappoint you. Whispering softly, she caressed the hilt of the sword. Few knew, westward thousands of miles from the small human town, in a nameless valley, a most esteemed ancient god had been living in seclusion for 10,000 years. If she wanted, she could have enjoyed the worship of all gods in both eras, holding power second only to the divine king. But she gave up this choice, carrying this divine artifact, severing all ties with the world, until recently. On that day, Thea stepped out of the valley and found Hestia wandering the mortal towns. With her experience as a guide, she informed her first daughter, perhaps the change of epochs was approaching again. All gods would tremble before supreme power, with the old king and the new king alternating. Although she did not yet know who the next divine king was, the spirit realm's evident presence in the mortal world was a signal in itself. After all, aside from her, few knew how frequently Cronus engaged in secret exchanges with the spirit realm during his last days in the mortal realm. So you came to warn me. The sky shows signs of awakening, while corruption spreads deep within the earth. Among your 6 children, only I am not so deeply entangled with the current divine king. If I wish, under the divine protection in the next era, I might continue to be active in the world as an ancient god like those titans who never took part in the Great War. Even the new king would have to show me great respect. Speaking to the sickle in her hand, and the only response Hestia received was a fleeting glint of cold light. Indeed, that was Rhea's intention. Having experienced the shifts twice and accompanied one generation of the divine king for a millennium, the goddess who presided over the passage of time seemed to have long understood these matters. Resisting the greater forces seemed pointless. It would be wiser to go with the flow and withdraw early. As for Zeus, he enjoyed the power of the divine king, and this foreseeable calamity was initiated by him. Since it was what he desired, as the mother goddess, Rhea silently accepted it. No. You may accept it, but I don't. Lightly pressing her lips together, the goddess of Hoothfire tightened her grip on the sword hilt. Since you gave it to me, I am qualified to decide its future. While it might be insignificant against other deities, against patriarchy, it inherently disregarded the opponent's power, and when opposing the divine king, it could grant the wielder incredible enhancements. Hestia didn't know what the sky is awakening meant, nor why Zeus suddenly began inquiring about that ancient era. But with both appearing consecutively, it was hard not to make a connection. Uranus, a tyrannical and selfish king. His sole distinction from Typhon perhaps lay in being born in a primordial age when all things were inherently primitive and wild. Facing such an entity, should he revive, and without discovering Cronus, it's likely that Zeus would be his first target among the younger generation. After all, in his view, creation itself was his possession, and the position of divine king even more so, something Zeus clearly did not acknowledge. I hope matters won't escalate to that point. After all, the changing of epochs surely won't lead to the return of a previous divine king. The unease in her eyes could not be dispelled, and Hestia chose not to seek Zeus. Since he inquired about the first age, he surely had some preparation in mind, rather than exposing the scythe as her trump card. From the bottom of her heart, the goddess of Hearthfire did not wish the scythe's existence to further bolster his confidence. For thousands of years, Zeus had suffered too much because of this confidence. North of the town, the nameless temple. Leaving Hestia's cabin, Mephisto and his elder came to this place. In the eyes of the goddess of Hearthfire, this table temple was directed by the mother goddess for mortals to build, with her encountering his descendants. But in truth, this temple was unrelated to Rhea and barely had anything to do with them both. Entering the temple, eyes scanned over the statues of the 12 Titans, and Asmodeus's eyes flickered with a trace of remembrance. Though it was his past, from all perspectives, Cronus was already dead. Aside from memory and immortal essence, they no longer held any relation. Long, bang! The door opens and closes. A ray of sunlight briefly enters the temple. 12 towering statues of gods are swept by the light, especially the one in the center, the divine king. Cronus, the king of temporal, perhaps because he once conquered the sun, Hyperion's position subtly worships him. Of course, among the Titans, there are those whose positions would never be touched by sunlight, such as Ceus in the far corner. He hides in the shadows, standing apart even from Phoebe. It's as if they are not spouses, but strangers long separated. You're like this, and so am I. Isn't that right, Ceus? Speaking softly, the Lord of the Nine Hells seems to talk to someone. However, no one responds to him. The temple is silent. This is normal since its inception. Few come to this temple dedicated to the Titans. Humans who know of their existence dare not worship. Mortals who don't know their existence see no reason to worship. In the end, though it always exists, its inherent desolation never changes. Smiling, shaking his head, Asmodeus pays no attention to this wordless silence. He just slowly moves forward, examining his own past statue. The towering stone statue is rough and wild, yet accurately portrays a few of the divine king's divine rhythm. After a moment of contemplation, the Lord of the Nine Hells understands that to unravel the mystery behind this temple, he needs a form of authorization, something only Cronus possesses or knows. But just as he prepares, a familiar sharpness suddenly comes from the edge of the town. That is the sickle. First surprised, then realization dawns on his face. As its former first holder, no one understands the nameless scythe better than Asmodeus. Even if he has abandoned the past, he could find this divine artifact at any time and bring it back to hell if he wants. But at this moment, gazing at its aura, the Lord of the Nine Hells does nothing. He merely watches quietly, only a trace of nostalgia flashing in his eyes. Your Majesty. After a while, speaking softly, Mephisto slightly bows. If you don't wish to retrieve the divine artifact yourself, I might take the liberty to do it for you. In at most 3 days, I can have it appear before you. The voice is calm, as if describing the most ordinary matter. Although in terms of pure strength, Hestia wielding the nameless scythe could easily toss him around. But at this moment, neither the speaker nor the listener doubts this matter in the least. With Mephisto's capabilities to deal with Hestia, he could conceive 100 ways to save the country by indirect means. However, standing in front of him, with a slight shake of his head, Asmodeus still declines the proposal. No need, let it stay there. It is of no use to me now. But if that day truly comes, then it can always return to my hand. That day naturally refers to when Uranus awakens. If that time truly arrives and the other can still recognize him, the Lord of the Nine Hells wouldn't mind trying his old nightmare himself, the insurmountable peak in his eyes. After all, to the holder of patriarchal power, the power of this sickle is unparalleled. Even a Genesis artifact like the Well of Reincarnation pales in comparison. All right, let's get back to the main topic. Since you refuse to see me, let me come to you. Retracting his gaze, Asmodeus naturally knows, the goddess who governs the passage of time is just a valley away, a place he can reach with a stride. But he does nothing, simply placing a hand on the towering statue. The next moment, a wave of temporal and spatial fluctuation emanates, and the middle-aged man's figure disappears. In this empty temple, only Mephisto is left. Truly complex. Feeling inside, Mephisto cannot fully comprehend Asmodeus's behavior. After all, possessing such power, just do whatever you want, why make it so complex? As the first-generation demon transformed from silver humanity, Mephisto cannot empathize. Regarding the emotions of most gods and humans, he stands at a rational standpoint to analyze, manipulate, even mock their flaws, never personally experiencing them. In the past, he always thought his king was like this too. Being the creator of demons, he ought to be like demons, even higher and purer. But now, it seems his judgment may have been mistaken. Tiske, wait. Who's there? In an instant, in the center of the temple, his previously relaxed expression suddenly changes. Mephisto becomes as if facing an enemy. Vaguely, he seems to sense something entering this temple, yet can't detect any concrete trace. This strength, is it some special authority? Secrecy, space, shadow, or the mysterious and imperceptible destiny in time? Black mist spreads. The innate power of demons permeates the temple. Mephisto points forward, attempting to mobilize a hidden trump card. No matter what, since he can sense even a bit of the other's trace, it shows their strength gap isn't as insurmountable as between true God and great divine power. With the preparations he had made over the years, it was not impossible to capture it. But the next moment, before he could employ his methods, Mephisto's actions suddenly paused. As if something had come to mind, he hesitated for a moment. He didn't rush to act, but quietly observed. He noticed that although the intruder didn't pay attention to him, she didn't do much either. She seemed to just want to have a look, or perhaps to search through the long-gone times. Cough. Maybe I was mistaken just now. After a brief silence, Mephisto withdrew his hand. After only a moment of thought, he quickly found the crux of the matter. The reason he had made a mistake was probably still because his power was too weak. Even a trivial matter could be wrong. How could he allow this? Once he returned to Hell, he had to find a way to mention this issue, to let the Lord of the Nine Hells notice his weakness and mistakes. This way, perhaps he could enjoy a bit more of the dark force. Well, considering the massive power recently pouring into the Nine Hells, even though he knew there would likely be a share for him, who would refuse more if they could ask for it? Buzz. Time changes, space twists. When Asmodeus placed his right hand on the statue, he sensed a familiar force. It was the temporal divine power, belonging to the former god of spacetime, Cronus. It originated from the Second Era, when he, still a divine king, left some force behind while visiting Ceus in the starry sky to deal with the god of sun, Hyperion. This power itself was not strong. It was more of a witness, a token. But to manipulate this power, besides the god of the lightless celestial body who had been with it for millennia, probably only its owner could. Undoubtedly, it was a silent test, a key verifying some identity. No matter who it was, as long as they could unravel it, they evidently had a close connection to Cronus, even if they weren't him. A very clever scheme. You know what that place is. So you guessed I would go and check, eventually discovering what you left behind. To go through such a roundabout way, truly befitting you, Ceus. Unless truly necessary, no one would remember your existence at all. His expression remained calm, without a noticeable change. In fact, as anticipated by the other. Long ago, Asmodeus had already discovered this temple, as it was built near the valley where Rhea secluded herself. Only a few contemporaries among the Titans could have achieved this. As for the other primordial gods, they likely did not have time to build any temples for them. But at the time, the Lord of the Nine Hells paid it no mind, because although he understood Zeus' purpose in building the temple and knew what he ultimately wanted, he could not provide those things at the time. And for them, trying to get something for nothing was not really possible. Thus, he just noted the matter and kept ignoring it. As time passed by, thousands of years swiftly went by. Only recently has this situation finally changed. Asmodeus found what the other wanted, and meanwhile, he had needs concerning the existence of chaos as well. With both circumstances coinciding, he came here today to visit his former brethren. He believed the other would not disappoint him. Buzz, flap, as the Lord of the Nine Hells returned to the present world, ancient steels stretched out before his eyes. In the distance, the sea crashed against the shore, storms ravaged and howled. To the south, the vast Nisa mountain range stretched endlessly, where the legendary Fates resided, overlooking all beings in the northern lands. His gaze slowly swept the surroundings, and a trace of realization flickered in Asmodeus's eyes. He remembered where this was. It was the extreme north of the earth by the coast next to the northern sea, also where those followers of Zeus lived when the golden humanity was first created in the Second Era. This row of steels were their graves, and also the earliest traces of human civilization. His eyes turned slightly, and unsurprisingly, the Lord of the Nine Hells found more ancient, abandoned temples. Here, the ancient golden humanity had once built a palace for the god of the lightless celestial body. Besides him, there were also several deities who were similarly active in the northern lands at the time. However, as they died, all of this returned to emptiness and silence. Shaking his head slightly, Asmodeus couldn't help but marvel at the other's caution. If it were not himself here, perfectly aware of whose temporal divine power was left there, replacing him with other deities, even if they held the divine authority over time or space, they would only come here by guidance and not know what the guidance was truly for. Evidently, to prevent others from discovering his actions, Zeus truly went to great lengths. But thinking about it carefully, the Lord of the Nine Hells could understand him. The other's goal was quite clear. It was to guard against Zeus, perhaps even adding the Dark Overlord. In the face of the potential threat of great divine power, no caution was excessive. With an unrestrained smile, Asmodeus glanced around. Ultimately, he did not step into Zeus' temple, but rather arrived at a rather unfamiliar hall. Bam! He pushed open the large doors. His gaze swept over the paintings on the stone doors. On them, there was a scene of a meteor falling from the sky, with several titans observing from the clouds. Entering the temple, the layout was somewhat odd, seemingly not molded to the specifications of a true god. Yet, in the main position where a statue was enshrined, it was an existence known by all in the present age. The goddess of the magic net, Hecate. The final hurdle. Aside from us who were involved, no one else will remember that special past. Who would have thought, instead of leaving your attention in your own temple, you left it in someone else's? Yet, in fact, Hecate had never come to the north at that time. She knew this was your domain, so she never interacted with the golden humanity here. As he spoke slowly, Asmodeus's expression gradually became more solemn. The reason for such a large detour, ultimately, was because he was no longer Cronus. Without this, he could have directly sought the other instead of playing some decrypting game here. But it should end here too. Zeus, aren't you going to come out and meet me? This time, it might be your only opportunity in this life. His voice calm, Asmodeus looked towards a corner of the temple. After a moment, that patch of shadow finally squirmed slightly. Cronus, should I call you that? Or are you just his ally? A steady and deep voice arrived, without forming any figure. The god of the lightless celestial body's mind sent out the voice. In fact, even now I cannot confirm your identity. After all gods are undying, and divine authority is eternal. And your changes exceeded my expectations. Yes, to see us at this moment, even after repeated confirmation, it was difficult to believe the person before him was the same person he knew. After all, to a god, anything might change except for godhood. Even the disassembly of the world was merely a partial reduction, not complete return to nothingness. In the temple, there was a moment of silence. Zeus' words were straightforward, but Asmodeus could understand his concerns. As the other party said, there was indeed nothing about him that could be related to Cronus right now, unless he truly revealed the entire process of how he reached this point. However, that was impossible and unnecessary for him to do. Regardless of whether the other party believed in his identity, as long as he could provide Zeus with what he wanted, there was no difference between the two. The god of lightless celestial body desired to contact Cronus, simply because he was the former divine king, one not tolerated by Zeus, and had once collaborated with the Titan's god. But on the other hand, as the great being from the invincible abyss and the demon monarch ruling the 9 hells, his identity could equally dispel the other party's doubts. Whether I am or not is not important. What matters is that I am indeed not a primordial god, nor an outer god like the mother tree. And in this world, only I would come to you at this time to solve the doubts you have always had. Speaking calmly, Asmodeus didn't elaborate further. He merely revealed a slight essence of himself, the proof belonging to the immortal deity Chaos's great divine strength. Invisibly, the law of the material world made a slight reaction as if verifying what he said. And standing in the shadows, the manifestation of the god of lightless celestial bodies saw this scene without reservation. And he too understood what the Lord of the 9 hells wanted to express. There is no one else, among the deities of chaos, greater than the primordial gods. And as compared to Cronus, who was likely only promoted through the divine authority's special case, if the person in front was not him, that might actually be a good thing. After all, Zeus was not the divine king, and he never had a chance to inherit the throne. After a moment of silence, he slowly emerged from the shadows. The god of lightless celestial bodies figure, like one chiseled by blade and axe, appeared. He looked at Asmodeus before him, paying the due respect to the great being. Greetings, your esteemed highness, regardless of whether you are Cronus. As you can see, I have indeed been expecting this for a long time. But before that, there is one thing I would like to know. The voice was low, carrying a heavy echo, like the ancient celestial bodies resonating as they moved in the starry sky, causing the air to quiver slightly. A plan laid out thousands of years ago was finally coming to fruition, and Zeus should have felt joy for this. Yet, at this moment, he did not feel so and instead formally inquired. For thousands of years, I have always known. To achieve true great divine strength, the most crucial point is to have one's complete and independent symbolism. However, the law of the world never grants this opportunity. Since the first age, no gods in the current world have succeeded. Except for those born before the mother goddess or those who wielded the divine authority, no one has ever broken this limitation. Your appearance might be an exception from outside the present world, an opportunity found only in the outer abyss. The possibility of this existence fills me with great joy, but what I want to know is, to gain this opportunity, what must I sacrifice? And in this process, what do you require me to do? The experiences of the first age tell me that everything destiny offers has already been marked with a price in secret. Although I want to become a great divine strength, if the price is to end up like my father god and the real Cronus, then giving up is sometimes not an unsuccessful option. Not overwhelmed by the benefits before him, Zeus knew that since the person in front of him had seen through his intentions, then perhaps, as he said, he held certain information that could truly allow him to take that step. But correspondingly, the god of lightless celestial body also clearly knew that becoming a great divine strength might just be the beginning, especially considering the fates of the previous 2 divine kings, which made him very certain of his judgment. The heavenly god Uranus contributed greatly to the present world. Even though this achievement was the result of destiny's guidance, due to Lane's prophecy, he prematurely met eternal sleep before exhausting his own heavenly destiny. The second-generation god-king was even more enigmatic. He never exhibited power beyond the true god for an entire era. Yet at the finale of everything, He suddenly acted and ended the Titan War with unmatched force, only to inexplicably relinquish authority and leave the entire Earth. Perhaps others never remembered, but hiding among the stars for thousands of years, Zeus never forgot to watch the mortal realm. He still clearly remembers that when all gods were suppressed by the second-generation god-king and unable to cope, Mother Earth had angrily questioned Cronus. "Who are you?" No one knew what went through the mind of the god of lightless celestial body at the time. Only from that day on, he completely abandoned everything in the mortal world. In a sense, the reason why he established such a temple in the mortal realm was not so much to attract Cronus, but actually for another purpose. That is, if the other party could still walk freely in the world, could he tell him what exactly happened back then that allowed him to ascend to greatness in a single step, only to vanish without a trace after a moment of brilliance? Such a result was truly terrifying and too unknown.